Hey folks, today I want to talk about Void Seeders. This is an expansion for Nemesis that I think most people who own Nemesis have just because of how Kickstarter works. And while Void Seeders is actually my favorite version of the game, there is one thing that I wish they did a little differently. For the most part, Nemesis does a decent job of representation. I love that there is a character in a wheelchair that suffers no penalties for it. So I was a little disappointed that one of the main mechanics in Void Seeders is an insanity tracker. Now, psychological trauma is a common horror trope. The horror genre loves to tap into primal fears. That's why jump scares in movies are still effective, even though you know they're coming. The idea that you might lose control over your own bodily autonomy is an understandable concern. And since Void Seeders is clearly drawing from horror films, it makes sense that they would include this. So why am I talking about it? Put simply, there is an unearned stigma associated with neurodiversity and mental health disorders that makes recovering from and living with these conditions that much harder. People in these groups have told us that the word insane is harmful to them because, among other things, it reduces a complex diagnosis to something simple and purely negative. In a similar way to how it's much less likely to hear the word retarded used in a pejorative context, words like insane and crazy are, for good reason, starting to fall out of use. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to put the designers of Nemesis or anyone who enjoys this game on blast. This is a relatively new movement. The usage of insanity in Void Seeders does fit with common tropes, and there are definitely worse offenders in the game industry. I'm looking at you, every Lovecraft game I've ever played. The inclusion of this term in Void Seeders is perfectly understandable, but that doesn't mean it can't be improved. It's not always easy, but I've been trying to remove crazy and insane from my common use vocabulary. Usually I'll say something like wild instead. And to this end, I think a simple substitution like this it can be made for Void Seeders, and pretty much every other game that uses some kind of mental health meter. Instead of insanity, I think it would be better to track a character's psychic distress. On top of not hurting anybody, this fits well with what the characters are experiencing. The kind of prolonged, insidious corruption that you experience at the hand of the Void Seeders would naturally affect different people in different ways. So when you look at the panic cards with their various consequences, it makes sense that these would be a result of a buildup of psychic distress and not just generic insanity. Now, I'm not an expert on this, nor am I personally affected by these things, but I do know people who are. And it's one of my goals to make sure that no one I ever game with feels excluded because of things outside of their control. Now, I'm not saying you should feel bad for enjoying these games, but if we can start putting pressure on developers to be more sensitive to topics like this, it will only improve the hobby. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.